Hello and welcome. My name is Serena Baptista, and this is Bridge to Healing podcast. I love doing this podcast because we get to meet the most fascinating, interesting, and leading people. And today we have one of those leaders. Her name is Julie Cluff, and she is a grief healer and an intuitive angel guide. She creates a safe space to assist others in their healing and awakening journey. She is also a mother that has children on the other side. And so you can bet that the place where she comes from is very different than a lot of other people, just like with me and JT. I'm so happy that you're here, Julie. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. This just feels really special to be here with you today. So thank you.
Absolutely. And what I love to do on this podcast is to help others understand, different ways that they can help with their grief, different ways that, that other people can bring more healing and more information based upon whatever anybody is going through. And one of the things that I want to talk about today is your miraculous grief healing after the loss of your two youngest children in a car accident and what that has done for you. Let's go back first to that incident because I know coming from the place that I come from with JT, it's a life changer. So please share a little bit about that beautiful healing that took place and what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just to go back to the incident where when my daughter Carrie and who was 10 and my son David who was 8 back to the day that they passed over and that was, it was Mother's Day actually in 2007, and we were making a cross country trip. It was me and my three youngest were in the car with me. I had my 12-year-old son with me as well. He was in the seat next to me as I was driving, and the two younger kids were in the back seat, and we were having a great day, having a great road trip. It was not something that was unusual for us to go on a road trip. And suddenly I found myself waking up, and I had fallen asleep, having never felt tired that whole day.
Oh,
I
wow.
never even felt sleepy. I've had experiences where I've been driving and thinking, oh, I need to pull over and get some rest, but that was not what happened that day. And I actually had somebody that worked with me years ago, and she said it was almost uh, just a hush came over the car. It was just almost
Wow.
like, and really from my perspective now, I feel certain that that's exactly what happened. Because it felt like one minute we were all chatting in the car, and the next minute I'm waking up behind the wheel and we're bouncing along in the median between
Wow.
the eastbound and westbound lanes on this highway at the border of Alabama and Mississippi. I mean, it was just the most bizarre thing. And when I went to bring my SUV back up on the road, I felt the wheels lift off the road, and we just started to roll. And we rolled and rolled across 2 lanes of highway into the grass on the other side of the highway. And when the car stopped, there was just destruction everywhere. My son James was, in the front seat crying. He'd been hurt, and but when I called for Carrie and David and I looked for them, they were not in the car. They had been thrown from the car.
Oh, no.
And what felt like, and I know they couldn't have been this far, but it felt like they were a football field away from the car. And I was so stunned physically, emotionally, in every way that I was just trapped in the car. Not literally trapped, but in many ways I felt trapped in the car. And um, ambulances showed up and took them to one hospital, took my older son to another hospital, took myself and my older son to another hospital. And I spent, I don't know how long in that hospital asking about my kids, asking if they were okay. I had updates about James because we were in the same hospital, my 12-year-old son. I had updates for him, but when I would ask about Carrie and David, there were no answers. But when that car stopped, like when we were sitting there and I'm looking at all the destruction around me, I knew in my heart that Carrie and David were either both here or they had both gone. They were
Mm,
both gone because they were so close. I just could not imagine them one staying and one leaving. It was almost like it was just this knowing that they were both gone or they were both here. A couple of really interesting things happened. While the car was rolling, I heard a voice tell me to bring my arm in. And um and it was calm and it was not urgent. It was just, bring your arm in. It was just this very, and somehow I had the presence of mind to do that. And over the next couple of years, I learned about or met people who had lost their arms in a rollover accident. And so I feel like, the angels were protecting me from yet another loss on top of a loss that was already hard to imagine, hard to assimilate, hard to
everything.
understand. It was just everything. And at the same time on that day, I also experienced some really otherworldly peace that it was it's hard to it's hard to express because it was like this um just horrific, painful, agonizing uh I mean when the car stopped and I realized all the destruction, I was screaming, I killed my kids, I killed my kids. Like I went from that to peace, back to panic to peace. I felt the presence of Jesus with me, bringing me peace. And I know that wouldn't be the experience for everyone, but for me, that was very much a calming, peaceful thing. And I can go back into that now and just feel that peace that makes no sense. I
Wow.
remember a friend of mine calling me at the hospital when she learned about the accident, learned about the kids, and I remember telling her, they're okay. They're okay. They're forever safe. I remember telling her that. I knew that I wasn't okay, but I just felt certain from that moment that they were okay. And so there were these little um, glimpses of light and hope, even in that darkest hour. And over the next couple of weeks, it was just incredibly painful. And I can remember sitting in my backyard and thinking, I'd lost my brother to suicide several years before this, and I remember thinking, somehow I healed from that. Is it at all possible I could heal from losing my children, which seemed impossible, but at the same time, it gave me there was always this spark of hope. But I went
Yeah.
into I didn't have the understanding that I have now. And yet, when I look back, I see that all the pieces that I needed for healing were available to me at the time of the accident. But my human self needed the time and the learning and the growth to access that healing. And so
Isn't
the
that
next,
interesting?
yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yes, and that leads to other pieces of this too. The incredible amount of learning that you had to had to do, the incredible amount of, the healing is unbelievably, the unbelievably in your face, right? You have to walk through it, you have to do it. And in that time, it really feels like you were guided.
Yeah, absolutely. There were so many things that happened. 6 months after the accident, I walked into a drugstore and I saw the cops' costumes that were out for Halloween. And I walked in and I saw this costume and I thought, oh, Carrie would love this. And as soon as I thought that, of course, reality hit
Yeah.
and I realized there would be no costume for her that year.
Yeah.
And that was so painful. And in my head, I said, why did this have to happen? And I heard an instant reply, which was they're right where they're supposed to be.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Right.
So
And that's not
I kept
something,
receiving this confirmation that
right.
that they were where they were supposed to be.
And that's not something you would think as a mom. As a
Yeah.
mother, we would not have, that's not something that would be in our minds. Absolutely not. So
Yeah.
I know that that was guided, that that was information from where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. But when I heard that they're right where they're supposed to be, my brain went to, well, why did it have to happen this way? And interestingly, the reply I received was, how would you have liked it to happen?
Wow.
And when you think about that answer, like it's a question. So, of course, our brain goes to trying to answer the question. And my brain went to try to answer that question, and there's no good answer. And also, there's the implication in that question that they're right where they're supposed to be, that this was supposed to have happened. So it was like a double confirmation once again. But then again, it still took me months for my humanness to come on board with the
Well, of
idea of
course.
healing. Yeah. About at the 3 year mark after this accident, I had a trip. He didn't travel internationally. Um, I can think of maybe twice when he worked for that company that he traveled internationally, but he had a trip to London and he ended up taking me with him. And we ended up, he had his meetings and things, but then we took some extra time and we ended up at Stonehenge. Well, just like last year, I learned about the energetic center at Stonehenge. It's not that I hadn't heard about that before, but they talked about it as being like a chakra point. And the particular thing I saw talked about it being like a heart chakra point. And I went, well, that makes so much sense because it was right about that time I experienced a really miraculous healing.
Oh, wow.
When I came back from London, I was attending a church at the time, and the pastor offered to pray with me, and I was like in such a dark place. I can remember walking down the hallway to his office, and it was just like the darkness was tangible. It was like I was just filled with so much. Honestly, I'm just going to say self-hatred because I had caused the accident. I caused the pain of my family. I caused the death of my children. Like that's all I was so consumed with that it was just hard for me to lift out of that in any way that made any sense. And so my husband and I, walked down that hallway and I received this special prayer. And within 24 hours, I just felt like a totally new person. Like
Wow.
all that darkness had lifted. It was almost like I physically, tangibly saw and felt that darkness just start to dissipate and move. And I'm always learning and growing in new ways. And as I've kind of discovered new things, it's almost like the earth came in to support me at Stonehenge and heaven came in to support me from heaven. And it
Oh,
was like
beautiful.
I was just cradled in this beautiful divine energy that created this healing. So a few years later, when I received some really divine guidance to begin talking about what happened and to begin talking about grief and healing,
Yeah.
I question like, how am I supposed to talk about that? Because, I experienced kind of this miraculous healing and I can't promise that to people. But I just moved forward with sharing my story and providing, grief coaching and grief support. And as I did that, I began to develop a program and it all began to fall into place, piece by piece. And um, I actually had in 2012, I met this man at an event and he learned about my story. And as we were walking out, he took me by the arm and he said, "You're supposed to do something with this."
Oh,
And it was
beautiful.
like lightning hit me. It was, I just felt it in every piece of my body, but it took me a little while to figure out what that was. And I'm still figuring it out. I'm still developing.
Isn't that truth?
Yeah, I'm still learning new things. I'm still being guided in new directions. I look at you and I think, oh my goodness, I love that you're doing mediumship. I'm I'm a developing medium. I have been studying it for a couple of years. I've been offering um,
Awesome.
readings, and um, it's been beautiful.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because I know when something like this happens, it opens the door, right? It opens the door. Our kids are there and they want us to step into our purpose and to be doing what we are supposed to do here. And truly, you are here to help people. And so let's talk about that a little bit about the work that you're doing with others, the intuitive coaching, the angel work, mediumship channeling. What can you share with us about that, about how you're helping others?
Well, where to start? It's I started out I actually trained as a life coach initially and then began to add grief a specialty in grief and understanding the grief process. And then like I said, I was guided to develop this program. And then as I was working with people, I would so often feel the person that they've lost in the room with us. They were literally guiding the session. But
Wow.
I was at that point in my own understanding where I didn't know how to tell somebody, hey, your daughter's here or your wife is here or your dad is here. I didn't really know what to do with that. So I would just listen. Often I would have somebody sitting across from me saying, I feel so guilty about, whatever. And I would hear their loved one in my ear saying, I don't want her to feel guilty. I don't want him to feel guilty. It really is not his fault. And I would feel that, but I didn't know how to communicate that. But I would allow that what they were sharing with me to help guide me as I was coaching someone. And so that's where it all began. In many ways, in 2020, I had a friend whose son passed away, and at this point, I had learned to communicate with my children and my brother. Um,
Wonderful.
but as I got in my car, I felt this friend's son in the car with me, and I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? So I just pulled out my phone and just, intuitively just listened and just wrote down what I was hearing.
Good.
And as I did that, and later I was able to share that with his mom. But those kinds of things started happening, and I thought, I need to understand more about what this is and how this works. Um, it all like the channeling, the angels, all that started with the number 12. I- a few years ago, I was seeing 12s everywhere, and I thought, this can no longer be um, chalked up to accident.
Right.
There's something more going on here. And that led me to my investigation into angels and so forth. And then at one point, I was on a trip, and we were going on a whale watching trip, and we were out on this boat, and it was the afternoon, and I was grumpy. And I was thinking, we're not going to see any whales. Nothing was happening. I was feeling pretty disappointed. And I heard, Julie, you have angels. And when I heard that, at that point, I was already familiar with angels. I was working with angels to some degree, but wasn't publicly talking about it. And when I heard you have angels, I just started saying in my head, angels, thank you for bringing the whales close to the boat. Thank you for bringing the boat close to the whales. And I was just saying this, in my
Wow.
head, thanking them for being there. Thank you. And I just my energy just lifted, and I was just feeling this inspiration. And within 10 minutes, we were surrounded. We were surrounded by
Oh,
whales. We had dolphins swimming along beside us. They were just everywhere, just playing in the water, putting on the most magnificent show until our guide was, and our guide was going crazy. He's like, "You guys have the best energy." And I'm like, "You have no idea. It's not me, it's the angels." And
yes.
and later on, at different times, my daughter communicated to me that she was part of the team that brought the whales
Oh.
to the boat. And then later from that, my son said, "I was there too." This is his mantra. He's like, "I was there too." He's always kind of showing up that way. Don't forget me.
That's awesome.
He's
Yeah, it
very
feels like
playful.
she's running the show though, and he and he's like, "No, wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Me too."
He's super playful. He shows up all the time. He's just was playful in life and is playful on the other side as well. So, yeah. And then it was the next day, I received a very direct message that I needed to start teaching about angels. And so I went home
Great.
from that trip and started doing webinars and classes on angels and spirit communication. And it's been a lot of
It's
fun.
one of those areas that is just so many people, it's so mythical, and they don't understand that we all have them. They're right here. We just have to learn how to connect with them, how to communicate with them. But they're here and they're here to help us no matter what. They're our special helpers. And so I'm so happy that you're doing that and that you have been developing these different things that have been helping other people. So any ongoing events that you're doing, anything that brings that in or anything like that? Why don't we talk about your upcoming
Yeah.
things?
Yeah, so I do have a couple of classes that are available. I have a spirit communication class. I have a create magic in in your life class.
Nice.
Talking about like bringing that in. On my website, I do have a download. It's like a small ebook, if you will, about angels and some of the myths that we carry.
Oh,
Like so
good.
often people will say, "Well, my angels showed up when this tragic thing happened," or when like bring your arm in, right? Like we think of them as showing up when the really, really hard, the big things, but they're, like you said, they're here all the time. They
All
want
the
to help
time.
us. They're not judging us. They're not shaking their finger at us. If when I hear a client say, "Well, you know, I I heard my guide saying you need to get your act together," I'm like, "Well, that's your critical voice filtering their message because they're they love us, they care about us, they want us to have amazing experiences here." And so um yeah, that's kind of the common misconception, and certainly some of the misconceptions. Like look at the whale watching. There was no life threatening event happening. It was just they wanted to bring joy. They wanted
Right.
to bring joy, and they just gave me this little inkling. Remember, you have angels. You can call in your angels to help to have this experience. And so, it's not just the big things, it's the little things. I live out in the woods, kind of. On these winding country roads out in Tennessee. And sometimes when I'm driving at night, I'll talk to my angels and I'm like, "Thank you for keeping the deer off the road so they can be safe and
Yes.
so I can be safe." And so I'll talk to my angels about, let's create some safety here. Sometimes when I'm driving down the highway, the other night I was driving home. It was late at night. We were about 3 hours from home, and I was driving, and it was almost like they were driving. I don't know how else to express that, except it just felt like I was being carried down the highway, just in this bubble of angelic energy. And it's really just is, and I do the same thing. I forget I have angels. I forget I have guides. I go about my day and I'm like, "Oh, everything's a mess." And then oh, wait, I have angels. So we just all, get to be reminded that we have angels. We have people who care about us on the other side. We have this angelic um, energy that's around us all the time, and it's just. it just behooves us to acknowledge the love and the care that we are can that is continuously available to us on the other side. But yeah, I do intuitive angel sessions where, people come and they ask questions, and we go in and we ask, we ask the angels, we ask the guides what they would want us to know. And very soon, very soon, I'm going to be offering mediumship to the public because I
Good for
really,
you.
really enjoy that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those, I don't know about you, but when I had my first mediumship reading, it really made so much difference in my healing. And at that point, I knew that I was a medium and that I was trying to get into training and all of that. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to
Yeah.
help those people, of course, parents, but anybody. We all lose people, lose as in quotes, lose their physicalness here. So I'm so happy that you're stepping into that because as I say, there's so much healing in that area that we need to do, and we need to share that our loved ones don't just leave. I always thought when JT left that he was off on a cloud somewhere, that
Mhm.
he was inaccessible. That's just not the case. They will be
Right.
here whenever we ask them to be here. So I'm very happy that you're doing that. You also
And
have,
don't you?
oh,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Well, I was going to say, don't you like, sometimes I'll hear people say, "Oh, I wish so and so could be here for the wedding," or "I wish they could be
Yes,
here to see the new baby." And I always say, they're here.
they're
They
already
are
here.
experiencing all
Yes,
of this. Like, when my oldest daughter got married shortly after Carrie and David passed, I felt them there. I knew that they were there. But
right,
at that point in my understanding, I didn't understand that I could facilitate that connection.
right.
I always was, at that point in my understanding, I just thought I might feel them drop in every once in a while, but I didn't realize I could reach out to them, that I could communicate with them. And so all of that understanding has been beautiful to
Oh,
develop
that's
and to
wonderful.
share.
Yes, I agree completely. And all of the work that you did with your own grief, too. I know that you have different programs for people who want to, well, heal their grief, you, of course, but also teaching people how to help others heal. Uh, Tell us about that. What is that program?
Yeah, so the program that I developed, I have a 120 page workbook that I use with clients. It's built around the Hope model of healing, the five foundations of growth, and all of that program I now teach to other people who want to either be a grief coach, or they're a mental health professional that wants more resources for helping people who are grieving. Grief support leaders, a lot of people who are in ministry that want to offer that within their congregations. And so we do have grief coach training, and we actually have uh, another round starting in September.
Oh,
So of that
wonderful. So
training.
just coming
Yeah.
up. That's
Yeah.
great. And tell everyone where they can reach this information. Where is all of this information that you have about all of these wonderful programs that you have and the services that you offer?
And the best place to find me is juliecluff.com. That will link you to, you can make an appointment. That will link you to my Build a Life After Loss program, where you can find the grief coach training. It will link you to the podcast Light the Day, where I
Beautiful.
interview people like Serena.
That's awesome. And I'll put it in the in all of the descriptions so that they know the spelling and all of that. It has just been amazing talking with you. And I'm just, being another mom who has a child on the other side, I'm just so grateful that we found each other and that our kids, what they're doing for us. And we know that they're immense souls. We know that, they came here for a specific purpose, and that part of that purpose was to help us and be our teachers. And they continue to do that. So I so
100%.
appreciate that you're here today, and I just can't wait to share this with everybody. So thank you so much for being a guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. And everyone, just check out the details in the description on where to find Julie's information. I really highly recommend that you go check it out. She has a ton of stuff on that website, something for everybody, whether you are a practitioner, whether you want to be a healing practitioner, whether you need healing yourself. Really, we come from that place of going through it, going through the fire. And so I really appreciate that you're here, Julie, and I encourage everybody to go and look at that. So thank you, everybody, for being here.